All right. Hey, guys. Today is our last class, and it's a chunk of reading because we're reading a lot of the book of Esther to get the story of Esther today. So I talked a little bit about it last week, but what you're going to need today is your sheet that has Esther with her 4 little character traits around her that are little flaps that you'll write on the inside. And we're also going to use the box that says the men in Esther's life. So it has the 3 different main character guys that we're going to talk about. I know normally I read all our readings from the ESV version of our Bible that we use in class. But this guy right here, Xerxes with the X, he goes by a different name in this version. So I'm actually going to read from my bigger Bible that actually does call him Xerxes, just so I don't have to always keep switching his name in my brain, and so that it's not as confusing for us. So yeah, I'm reading Esther chapters 2 through 8. So that's what, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's 7 chapters that I have to read. And I'm just going to kind of read it straight through, but pausing to just kind of give the synopsis of what happened in each chunk. And then we'll worry about filling in the worksheet pages. So, also, there's a few of you that I still need your test. Get your test to me, please. Seriously. If you don't get it to me, you're not going to pass. And I don't think you really want to redo all this all over again. So, just saying. As fun as I am, I don't think you really want a bonus year with me. So, I'm going to just start going here. You'll notice we're skipping chapter 1. That's because in chapter 1, it's just about King Xerxes and his old queen kind of getting in this scuffle about what the old queen Vashti did wrong, which is why he's kind of in the hunt for a new queen. So, that's kind of where we're going to pick up with the story. So yeah, I'm just going to get rolling because like I said, there's kind of a lot to discuss here and a lot to read here. But I'm going to try to keep it as short and sweet as I can, but it'll probably be a little longer than some of the other weeks. So we're going to start right with chapter 2, where it's called Esther Made Queen. So it says, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all these beautiful girls into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Now there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and features, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So far, we've got the king, Xerxes, on a hunt for a new queen. So he's bringing all the beautiful young girls to his palace to get beauty treatments so that he can pick a new queen. And we're introduced to the character of Mordecai, who is Esther's cousin, and he's been caring for her his whole life. And both Mordecai and Esther were brought over into the kingdom of Babylon during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, who we read about a couple weeks ago with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He was the one who, conquered Jerusalem and brought everybody to Babylon. So that's kind of where we are with the story. And so Mordecai's been taking care of Esther ever since her mother and father died. So when the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. The girl pleased him and won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. Before a girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil of myrrh and 6 with perfumes and cosmetics. And this is how she would go to the king. Anything she wanted was given her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem to the care of Shagaz, the king's eunuch who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her and summoned her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the girl Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave her a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberty. So all these women he's had gathered to try to be queen have gone through 12 months of beauty treatments. Girls, that's a long time of looking beautiful. And basically, so Esther went through all these treatments, and both Esther and Mordecai are Jewish because they came from Jerusalem. And Mordecai has told her, don't tell anybody you're Jewish, because the Jewish people weren't well accepted in Babylon. But so when Esther goes in after all her beauty treatments, the king really likes her. He likes her better than all the other women, puts a crown on her head, says, you're the new queen. So keep going. When the virgins were assembled the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers, who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were hanged on a gallows. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. So we already see Mordecai basically has saved the king's life because he found out that 2 other officials were plotting to kill the king. And Mordecai tells Esther, and Esther lets the king know, and those 2 men are put to death for plotting to kill the king. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. So we get introduced to a new guy, the king's highest up official, Haman. And Haman, everyone's supposed to bow down and tell him how awesome he is, according to the king. And Mordecai won't do that. Why do we know Mordecai won't do that? Because Mordecai is a Jewish person who's, of course, worshiping God and doesn't want to worship Haman. So this probably ain't going to go so well for Mordecai. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the 1st month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all the other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent out from the couriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so they would be ready for that day. Spurred on by the king's command, the couriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. So, Haman's big plan, when he finds out Mordecai won't bow down to him because Mordecai is Jewish, he says, "I want to get rid of Mordecai, but better than getting rid of Mordecai, let's get rid of all of the Jews." And so he picks a day coming up down the road where he's going to just kill off everybody, and he gets the king's permission to do so because he says, "The king, they're not following your rules. They're not bowing down to me." And the king's like, "Well, I made that rule, of course. Let's get rid of them." Now we know, though, the king is technically married to a Jewish woman, Esther. So we'll see what happens. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went out only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was in distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her, and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai and why. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to urge her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, "All the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king." So Esther gets word that Mordecai is weeping and wailing about how he and all the Jewish people are going to die outside of the king's gate. And she's at first a little embarrassed by his behavior and tries to send out more appropriate clothes for him to put on. And it's like, "Why are you doing this?" And so he sends back a copy and says, "Because Haman convinced the king that it's going to be okay to kill all the Jewish people, and you need to go to the king and tell him this isn't okay." And Esther's like, "That's great and all, but I can't go to the king unless the king summons me with his golden scepter. And it's been 30 days since he did that, so it's probably not going to happen. And I can't just go to him, because if I do, without permission, the king will have me killed." So when Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to a royal position for such a time as this." Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. So basically Mordecai says, "Esther, you're not going to get away with not getting killed just because you're living in the king's palace. You're a Jew too. And so you're going to have to go to him, even though you really don't want to. because this is probably why God brought you here for such a time as this. I even wore my such a time as this shirt today for my Esther story. So, Esther basically says, okay, you get all the Jewish people together, you guys pray and fast for me, and I'm going to do the same thing, and after those 3 days, then I'll go see the king, and if he kills me, he kills me. So, we're going to keep going on. We've got 3 more chapters to go, guys. No, 4 more chapters to go. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given to you." "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asks." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now what is your petition?" "It will be given to you. And what is your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question." So Esther goes in to see the king, and luckily he holds out the gold scepter to her. So she's not going to die. He's pleased with her. He's happy to see her. And he says, "What do you want? I'll give you up to half the kingdom." And she says, come to dinner. I've prepared a banquet for you." And so he and Haman, the king and Haman, come to dinner. And while they're at dinner, he says, "Okay, what is it that you want? I'll give you half the kingdom." And she says, "You and Haman come to dinner again tomorrow, and then I'll tell you." So she's kind of buying herself some time here. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he had neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zerush his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. "And that's not all," Haman added. "I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate." His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy." This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. So Haman goes home, and he brags to all his friends and family about how awesome he is because he has all this wealth, and the king loves him and has made him this high official, and even he alone got invited with the king to Esther's wonderful banquet, and he's going to be invited again tomorrow, but he says it's not worth it because I still have to see that Jewish guy Mordecai not bowing down to me. And so Haman's wife gets this grand idea and says, build some gallows, ask the king to hang Mordecai on it tomorrow, and then you can go to the next dinner totally a happy man. And Haman thinks that's a great idea. But this is where it gets interesting. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officials who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. Remember those 2 guys that Mordecai helped save the king's life? "What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. The king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe and the horse, and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate. But Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisers and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So that night, the king couldn't sleep. He's reading through the history books and says, "Oh, yeah, that guy Mordecai saved my life once upon a time. Did we ever do anything special for him for that?" And they go, "Oh, no, we didn't do anything." And Haman happens to be coming in to see the king about asking if he could, kill Mordecai. And before he gets a chance, the king says, "Great, Haman, what would you do for a guy who I really want to honor?" And Haman thinks it's all going to be about him and says, "Oh, you should throw him a big parade, take him through the streets, to show everybody how amazing he is." And the king says, "Great, that's an awesome idea. Go do that for Mordecai." Probably not the thing Haman wants to do because he doesn't really like Mordecai. But because the king has ordered it, he's got to go do it. And then he comes home humiliated, tells his friends and his wife, like, "Oh, I had to do all this." And they basically say, "Yeah, if that's what's going on and Mordecai's a Jew and, their God tends to step in, you probably don't stand a chance." But then Haman's rushed away for the second banquet party that Esther's having. So that's where we're at right now. So the king and Haman went to dine with Queen Esther. And as they were drinking wine on that second day, the king again asked, "Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted." Then Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor with you, O king, and if it pleases your majesty, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold for destruction and slaughter and annihilation. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no distress would justify disturbing the king." King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, "Who is he? Where is this man who has dared to do such a thing?" So Queen Esther finally gets to ask her request, saying, "King, me and all my people, there's a guy who's got a plan to kill us all on the same day." And the king says, "Who? Who's this guy?" Esther said, "The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?" As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house. He had it made for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. So Esther reveals that the evil plot was all Haman's plot. The king is furious about this, realizing that Haman's plot ends up killing off his queen, who he loves and thinks is beautiful. And on top of that, mistakes Haman pleading for his life as Haman trying to get overly friendly with the queen. And the king says, "I need Haman killed." And they said, "Great, Haman already built some gallows. Can we hang him on those?" And he's like, "Go for it." So the gallows that Haman had planned to use for Mordecai got used on himself. And so we've killed off Haman at this point. We have one more chapter to go. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor, favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman son of Hammedatha the Agagite devised, and wrote to destroy the Jews in all of the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as seems best to you, and seal it. Seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with its ring can be revoked. At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching out from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses, especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force of any nationality or province that might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves and their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses raced out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was also issued in the citadel of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. So once again, we see that the Jewish people, Esther comes and says, please, king, reverse the order. He's already brought Mordecai in because he realizes how he's related to Esther, and he's honored Mordecai now. And she says, but please, reverse the order. Let my people be saved. And the king says, of course, Mordecai, here's my official ring that you'll stamp these letters with. And you write out the letters saying everything that we need for the Jews. And we'll send them out the messages on my fastest horses so that everybody in every province knows about this. And basically, the Jewish people, they get to have their protection. They get to destroy anybody who comes to attack them. They just kind of get to party it up. And so that's kind of the story of how one woman in the Bible saved an entire population of Jewish people. So that's, in a nutshell, the story of Esther. I told you it was going to take me a lot longer to say that. So, hopefully by now, you at least have some of your little things ready. So, we have our picture of Esther, and around her we have 4 words that describe her. So, under the flap that says brave, we're going to talk about how she was brave. We know Esther was brave in her story because Esther went to see the king even though he didn't ask to see her. So, you have that there. Esther went to see the king, even though he didn't ask to see her. And I'll read it one more time. Esther went to see the king, even though he didn't ask to see her. Then I have my little flap called Beautiful. Probably should have done this one first. So that's kind of how her story started. So for Beautiful, we said, one favor with King Xerxes because of her beauty. Let's hold that there. One favor with King Xerxes because of her beauty. I'll read it once more. One favor with King Xerxes because of her beauty. All right. Under faithful, even though we don't mention God in this whole story in the Bible, we know that the Jewish people believed in God. And so we know she trusted she would be protected when speaking to the king. So hold that up. She was faithful when she trusted she would be protected when speaking to the king. She trusted she would be protected when speaking to the king. That shows how faithful she was to God and to her people. And finally, we have our loyal flap. So for loyal, we're going to say, she worked to save the Jewish people instead of hiding who she was. Remember, she could have hid the fact, and she could have tried to hide just as the queen in the palace. But we'll say, she worked to save the Jewish people instead of hiding who she was. So finally, that is, she worked to save the Jewish people instead of hiding who she was. Okay, so those are our 4 character traits for Esther. Then we're going to flip to our ones that say the men in Esther's life. So on the first flap, we have Xerxes. And we know Xerxes was king of Persia and chose Esther to be his new queen. So hold that up. Xerxes was king of Persia, chose Esther to be his new queen. And I'll read it once more. King of Persia chose Esther to be his new queen. On the middle flap, we have Mordecai. And here's what we know about Mordecai. He raised Esther and is Esther's cousin. He worked as a servant at the gate. So we have, he raised Esther and is Esther's cousin, worked as a servant at the gate. All right, turn it back so I could read it. I'll read it once more. He raised Esther and is Esther's cousin, worked as a servant at the gate. And finally, we have dun dun dun, bad guy Haman. Under Haman's flap, we're going to write, one of the king's officials wanted all the Jews killed. So I'll lift it up there. One of the king's officials wanted all the Jews killed. And I'll read it once more. One of the king's officials wanted all the Jews killed. All right, so that is our story of Esther. This is our last class for the year. So those of you who just started with me this year, you get to have one more lovely year with me. Those of you who have had for 2 years now, you are moving on pending everybody turns in their tests to me. Turn in your tests. Seriously. Because as much as I love all of you, I don't need a bonus year with any of you, and you probably don't need a bonus year with me, because then you're just going to have to do all of this over again, and that's really silly to have to do all of this over again for one test. Guys, it's 43 points. It's even less questions. Just get it done. Most of you have, but some of you, I still need it. You need to give it to me by Sunday. Seriously, okay? Because I want you all to pass. And it's super easy because you have all the answers. And if you're missing answers, go back and watch the videos some more. I sent them in the same link with all your test questions. So you have all the information you need. Just get it done. So yeah, that's the dealio. And otherwise, I don't know. I'll see you when I see you. Who knows when that is? So that's the deal. Get your stuff to me if you haven't already. If you have, your parents are notified. I graded your test. If you already sent them back, everyone who's turned them in, you've all passed. So yeah, you. So that's the deal. Okay, that is all I have to say. I'm gonna go out and enjoy the beautiful weather, and I hope you can too. So I'll see you when I see you.